I wanted to talk about the Hyrax ingestion process, which is a fairly complicated bit of the Hyrax and really all of the sub gems of Hyrax. And specifically, I wanted to talk about the base ingest process, and I wanted to talk about some of the things that both IIIF print and derivative rodeo maybe bring to the table that we extracted from the newspaper gem to try and make it a little more generic, and just kind of lay out this complexity problem. So the short version is that Hyrax supports two different ingestion architectures. There's the older actor-based, actor stack-based active Fedora ingestion, and then the newer Valkyrie-based ingestion. IIIF print as sort of a third orchestration layer. On top of that, we added the derivative rodeo to try and solve some of the underlying problems that we were seeing with the various ingestion flows. And that I think that, there's some real opportunity for persistence, for simplifying the stack here and taking something that is one of the harder things to get your head wrapped around when you first learn Hyrax development, and making it easier. Essentially, the baseline version of Hyrax does kind of not a lot of different things. It takes the upload and it attaches it to the work as a file set. It creates characterization, and it uh, generates derivatives and indexes the metadata. So that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish. But this sort of ETL process is inherently complex. That's why there's so many libraries and apps dedicated to just doing that part. And it's just a submodule essentially in Hyrax land. So this begins the same for every single one of these. Aw, sorry. Begins the same for every single ingestion. The Hyrax uploaded file is created when you first upload a file, and that's sort of the stored thing. And it has an idempotency guard. So when the file set URI is attached to the file set, to the uploaded file, like that one is then considered ingested. However, if anything else further down the process fails, there's no real indicator, right? Like you get a notification in the app, but that's kind of it. And so, like, it is really easy, I think, to get kind of abandoned uploaded files. Both the Active Fedora and Valkyrie processes start with this uploaded file, and both of them sort of skip any uploaded files that have a file set URI already. So let's talk about the Active Fedora version. Oh, good, my graphics did come in. Okay, cool. So here is the thing called the actor stack. There are there's the create with files actor, there's the attach files to work job, there's the file set actor, ingestion job, the file actor, and then eventually we write to the Fedora LDP. This is the legacy path. It is not an actual actor pattern. It is a middleware stack. I know it's called the actor stack. You would think it was the actor pattern. I just want to make clear that is not the case. It creates the file set, it attaches the work, it streams it over to Fedora through HydraWorks, it versions it, and then it kicks off characterization. After that, it stores the file as a Fedora object. It writes the properties on the PCDM file object. It kicks off a characterization job. This is the thing that goes and hits fits to get information about, like, if it's an image, it'll get its size and maybe its color roster. If it is a PDF, it'll get like the number of pages, and maybe something about the shape of the format of the page. If it's a video, it'll get what coding it is. Those are the kinds of things you get from characterization. And then at the end, it goes ahead and does a Solar index, and kicks off the derivative job. So if we're going to make thumbnails, etc., like that's where this starts. In Valkyrie land, we have a transaction-based process. So it creates the work create transaction, which has a set of steps. It works with the upload handler and then kicks off a Valkyrie ingestion job. And that creates a Valkyrie upload, which saves to the storage adapter. The storage adapter can be Fedora 6, it can be to disk, it can be to S3. Valkyrie supports a variety of storage adapters, and those are independently configured from the metadata adapter. And then it stores all the file metadata as a file metadata object. So this path moves orchestration into transaction steps and resource services, and kind of out and does away with the actor stack. Valkyrie separates the bytes from the metadata. The actual bytes of the file go to the storage adapter, and the metadata lives in a file metadata object that's persisted into the rest of the repository. So there's sort of an isolation there. This is a cleaner model, but it does mean some complexity in that separation. It does give you a better scheme for modern storage, background jobs, and bulk workflows. Indexing in the Valkyrie version is event driven. So there's an event listener and a listener pattern that handles the indexing. Events are sort of our connective tissue here. There's the file.uploaded, which is triggered by the like finishing of the file being loaded either on the Valkyrie side or the Wings side. There's the derivative generation has an event, and solar indexing are triggered all through the dry events. So it decouples the stages. Active Fedora and Valkyrie do not publish the exact same events in the exact same shape. So there are some points in the listener code that like have to figure out whether it's a Valkyrie object or an Active Fedora object, which adds a lot of complexity to that code base. Derivatives are currently selected by the first valid factory. So there's a list of derivative services, and it's passed in either the file set or the file metadata, depending on if it's AF or Valkyrie. And then it iterates through the configured services. Whichever one is the first one to be valid gets to do the derivative process. And then there's a fallback at the end for the file set derivative process. This creates thumbnails, can extract text, can do images, audio, and video derivatives. It really depends on the MIME type and the configuration. Baseline complexity comes from the dual support. It also comes from, and I didn't put this on the slide because this is now in my personal opinion, it comes from too many analogies. We have an actor stack analogy and a transaction analogy and an event listener analogy. And that is probably two more analogies than we really need to have. And I think maybe isn't the right analogies fundamentally, which is why there's extras. So I think that is a big part of the complexity personally. All right, let's talk about IIIF print. And IIIF print, again, was abstracted from the newspaper gem to make it not more generic and not newspaper specific. And then to add in some new features that we wanted specifically. So a lot of the stuff in IIIF print also applies to the newspaper gem. I want to be clear that we're standing on the shoulders of giants here with that work. So it creates this pluggable derivative service. And the first thing that the pluggable derivative service does is it means that more than one derivative processor can fundamentally operate on a given file set. So previously, you just hit the first one, and that derivative service has to be comprehensive. It has to do everything it could possibly need to do. And so what often happens is like if you want to make a thumbnail, you get a thumbnail, but you don't also get text extraction, right? If you want text extraction, then maybe you don't get a thumbnail. And so like that is, I think, a real problem. As IIIF print, like it subscribes to the listeners, and then it registers an after file set create hook, and supports a transaction destroy step. So there's a lot going on in this library. What it essentially does is we add the various pieces. Which service plugins do we want? Which derivative services are we interested in? And we specifically focus on taking PDFs, splitting them into child objects, and creating either high-res TIFFs or high-res JPEGs from those pages. This allows us to display a PDF in the UV with all of its component pages to search across those pages. Also with other IIIF, honestly, viewers, so the UV, Mirador, etc. That gives us like all of that capability. So in order to be able to really display page by page what's in the PDF, we either have to have the user download the PDF completely and use like PDF.js to embed it in the page or open it in their PDF viewer of choice, or we have to actually split that PDF on the back end once into its component pages and keep all those component pages as high res TIFFs or JPEGs. So that's what IIIF print does. Um, so, all right. Where am I? Triple IF print, it turns one PDF into mini works. So it attaches the component pages as individual works. So it has a parent work, and then there's a bunch of children work, and those children work have file sets. And then it enqueues quite a few jobs. So the uploaded PDF becomes the parent. Then we're creating this page tree. And then there's a bunch of relationship jobs that run at the end to like properly attach all those newly ingested works to the parent work. Uh, it adds three coordination tables to be able to keep track of its work. It's not super critical to our discussion today, but it does change the derivative selection mechanics. So instead of it just being the first one, it has this pluggable service. Okay, so underneath IIIF print is the derivative rodeo. And the derivative rodeo is a file transform layer. It's not an engine, it doesn't have any Hyrax knowledge. All it does is takes a file storage location and has some generation tools. So it knows how to do things like split a PDF into pieces or make a thumbnail or um, uh, run Tesseract and do OCR on an image. So that's what that code is all encapsulated in the derivative rodeo. This is sort of a rewrite of pieces that do exist in other places in the Hyrax stack. And it was rewritten specifically to give us this ability to plug in pre-existing files. So it first checks to see if it's been generated already, and if it has, it will stop. It's just like, cool, we're done. High five. Then it looks to see if it has a list of one or more possible like pre-sources, pre-built sources. So if you have already split your PDF into component pages and you have the component pages somewhere, or you've already OCR'd a given file and you have the OCR somewhere, as long as that's in a format or in a structure that your derivative rodeo is configured to see, it will go find it. So we can look on S3, it can look on a local disk and say, oh, I already have this file. Now I'm just going to copy that into place. I'm not going to generate it again. And then as a last resort, it builds the thing locally. The rodeo decision loop is a useful abstraction. This is idea of only generate it if we haven't pre-made it. Also means we can do things like use AWS Lambda or like stored compute to quickly generate files in parallel and drastically reduce our time for ingestion. So if we're ingesting a large collection, like we can say, okay, this is the pre-processed collection. We're going to go pre-process it off over here, and we'll spend the money to on the compute and get it done in 2 days. What would normally take a month if we just plug them one at a time into Hyrax through the normal ingestion process. But then in the meantime, somebody uploads something new that you haven't seen before, like you can just go through the normal processes so it does the right things. So together, IIIF print and the derivative rodeo split the PDF into pages, create child works, OCR them, all this good stuff. All right. The combined architecture can be really fragile. I just went through a lot of different steps and possibilities, and that is the big thing that I want to talk about. So I'm going to talk about some of the things we could do potentially to simplify, but I then want to hear from you all about like what is important to you and what are the things that we could um, fundamentally like work through. Um, Sorry, my brain just stopped. There. Okay. I'm going to talk about some possible simplification strategies. I want to hear from y'all what is useful to you, what things are interesting, if there are other ideas, etc. All right. Simplification strategy number one, and I decided that the pair of scissors was the exact right thing for this. We can drop active Fedora support. We've been threatening to do this for a little while now. I think it's getting to be time. If that makes you feel panicked, I want to hear from you about that. It doesn't mean you can't run the existing versions like that. That's not going to just like, I don't have a kill switch, I promise. But I do think that it may be time to remove all of that active Fedora code from Hyrax and clean things out. So no actor stack, we can simplify the ingestion jobs. The PCDM file stuff goes away. All the wings code goes away. It was always meant to be a bridge. It's always been meant to be removed. So this would be a significant reduction in the total code that's being maintained. We would then have one ingestion entry point, one file data model, one events structure, one derivative job shape. So there's less branching and rejoining of things throughout and fewer compatibility shows. That's probably the biggest, most controversial one. Then the simplification number two is making ingest a first class state machine. So right now we have a lot of the parts for a traditional ETL process, but not kind of all of them. And we could rewrite the transactions. Um, I see a question here. Would wings be completely removed or extracted into a gem? I had never thought about it being extracted into a gem. I do think that that is a fundamental possibility if that's something that is interesting to folks. I don't know who would maintain that based on the folks that are currently active in the community. But I do think that that's a really a very interesting idea. And I think that I'm going to think more about that, Brendan, and I'm going to come back to you with questions about how it would work. Okay. Idea number two is now that's a really good idea. Okay. Idea number two is to take some of the broader knowledge in not just Rails land, but software engineering in general. Look at the other pieces that come with ETL processes and start to bring those into what we have now. Maybe it means getting rid of event listeners. Maybe it means getting rid of the transactions and moving to something that's a little more comprehensive. Um, and uh, and that would then suddenly kind of make the whole thing maybe a little more boring and maybe a little simpler. And I think that that's really kind of the goal here. Simplification step number two is to make derivatives a graph and not a callback. I would propose that we take the pluggable derivatives architecture out of IIIF print and make that a first class Hyrax system. Just make that the way that the derivative process works, that it picks all of the valid ones and not just the first valid one. And then I would also take the existing file modification code, the things that actually split images or OCR images and all of that, and move all of that, replace all that code with derivative rodeo specifically. Whether we keep derivative rodeo as a separate maintained gem or we integrate it completely into Hyrax, I kind of don't care. But that structure of passing URLs back and forth and being able to very easily plug in outside streams of data, I think has a lot of power and doesn't need to be an add-on. I think that can be, those things could be fundamentally part of the derivative process. And that would do things like give us clear source templates, output locations, and status. And I think that could potentially really simplify the stack. And it means that IIIF print is doing less work and less overwriting. That's cool. Not everyone cares about that, but I also think it brings a lot of power to all the other derivative ingestion processes that people are doing. And then idea number four is to treat pages as file metadata when possible. The should, when we split a PDF, the things that we attach just be file sets, or should they be child works that contain file sets, is a constant burden. And I think that this is a debate that probably needs to be had at least one more time, especially in more current world where file sets can have more rich metadata. So in a post AF support world, I think that that could potentially be really valuable. Um, this is actually more about why we need to integrate derivative rodeo into the platform. So this is really idea number three with a cool hat. It's just more points than fit on that first slide, I guess. Or maybe I just came back here twice. That's also possible. Um, cool. And then overall, like simplifying the architecture, right? We currently have the uploads handler, Valkyrie uploads, metadata, ingestion, like getting to a place where these are steps in a tree that happen in process and possibly are not ever side effects of each other. Like characterization splits off a bunch of jobs right now. And I don't think that that's a good approach. I think that we need to isolate the steps and make them more clear. All right, some big decision points, and this is a place where I'd love to have a bunch of community discussion. Is again, are we ready to declare a Valkyrie only ingestion process? Are we going to split it off as a gym? Like, how are we going to approach that? Are page works a requirement, or is that just an implementation detail? How do people feel about the splitting? Um, are derivatives durable workflow records? So right now we create derivatives and sometimes they're backed up and sometimes they're not. And I think that that's a really big, complicated thing. Um, so I think that that is a big piece. And then just sort of some of the details about like what should we be doing here and what are the ideas that I haven't thought of that would simplify this architecture. Cool. I'm gonna stop there and I'm gonna like just encourage people to chime in. I believe you all can unmute at will, and I will try and keep up with the chat. Emily Porter says that having multiple pages per individual file set with derivatives instead of having individual child works, she felt like was a big win. Kevin asks, is all of this post Bulkrax importer? So Bulkrax very intentionally does the things that Hyrax does when you create a form input and then hands it to to Hyrax to do the rest. So Bulkrax, essentially, a Bulkrax ingested record goes through the same ingestion process we just went through for 20 minutes, as something that's uploaded via the web forms. And that I think is a valuable and worthwhile consolidation to not have two roads there. You can tell, Kevin, that that's something that I thought was really important and fought for a couple times. So that's a place where I have strong opinions. Anybody else have any comments, thoughts, gut reactions? Ryan thinks that a full state machine would help surface status to users and devs. I think that that's very true. Totally okay if this is a lot to take in. I think my big takeaway question from the community, and this is something I'm not actually asking you for an answer today on, because I just gave you a lot and I need people to mull it over a little bit, is simplification um, is simplification like this worth our effort? There are only so many things that we as a community have the energy and like financial capability and time to do. Is this one of the things that is worth doing? And so that's a kind of a bigger more existential question. But expect that I will be dropping into your interest groups and showing up random places and asking this that question. I think it is. I think it should be a priority. But I think that fundamentally, we need to make those decisions together. So that is a there's my pitch, something I want to work on. But I think that we as a community need to decide whether this is a worthwhile thing or not. Cool. I also see there's a pretty good ongoing discussion about the like whether we move the wing stuff into a gym. I think that to Daniel's point, like, do we have to then maintain all the existing API endpoints? I'm not going to try and summarize this conversation. I'm just going to participate in it. And then, Heather, I'm going to turn it back over to you to potentially wrap things up then. Oh, Chris Colavar did say here that he wants to have a discussion about how Avalon handles its derivatives. And I would be extremely bullish on a merging of components there instead of two isolated, distinct processes.
Rob, I would ask, what is sort of the next step? Where do we take this conversation and continue it?
Um, my thinking was one, I think the should wings be a gym is a excellent Slack discussion, and that we should kick that conversation there. And then two, I think that the like, is this a community priority thing? Is like something that I will come to you all and interest groups and et cetera to talk about. And so this is to me, a consensus, like the preview of the conversation kind of thing. So there'll be more for me on this as we go through the year. Um, I think that um, Kevin's question here about how many folks are on Valkyrie, I, I think the fundamental answer is not enough, and that
Mm.
a lot of folks are on the process. But I don't have great metrics, and I wish that I did. Did
Does it
that
sound-
answer your question, Heather?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I was just thinking this may also be, um, I've been thinking that there may be some topics arising where we might want to have like one-off brown bag conversations or sort of continue the kinds of conversations we have at Virtual Connect um, more often throughout the year and also record those. So this may be something that ends up falling into that category. And if so, we can make that happen.